Hey guys, welcome. I'm Grandmaster Jerry Fastly Phones now to another episode of MA Power Talk at the Dojine with Sport Karate Street, sponsored by UMAN. Today we're going way back to when I started competing. This gentleman was actually a top competitor before me. I was a fan and had an opportunity to compete against him a few times. But what's more important to me is that he was able to transcend not just from a competitor to a promoter of one of my favorite tournaments. I didn't compete in a lot of them. But I consistently make sure that I was at his events because they were phenomenal. Plus, they gave away a really nice watch. In addition to that, he's transcended as being a black belt in life to other endeavors, and we'll find out about that. He had a chance to travel around the world a few times over representing the United States, and hearing it better from him, I think, will make a little more sense. Without further ado, we have the legendary Master Charlie Lee. Are you there, sir?
Hi, Jerry. How are you?
Super good and getting better. Outstanding and improving and doing pretty cool. So listen, the way this thing works is this. When I ask you a few questions, and basically it comes down to this. What was either your motivation, your desperation, or inspiration to start off in the martial arts? What style was it? And what year? So I'm going to put myself on mute, so like that, you have the mic, sir.
Wow, you're going to make me show my age, but I started martial arts in 1969 with Grandmaster Jun Rhee. His late wife was the best friend of my mother, and he had come to the Washington, D.C. area from San Marcos, Texas, where he started and became the father of American Taekwondo. And I was 5 years old at the time, and my mother thought it was a good idea for me to get involved in Taekwondo, it being the national sport of South Korea. So that's how I got started. I'm not sure if there was any motivation when you're 5 years old other than to jump around and be as active as possible, but I stuck with it for several years, and then I got into baseball and basketball like a lot of little kids do when I was, from 10 years old to 13 years old. And then I got back into martial arts with Grandmaster Jun Rhee when I was 13. I got my black belt when I was 14 years old and have been with it pretty much my entire adult life. So my motivation, of course, changed as I got older. I was more into fighting than I was into form. At a very young age, I started kickboxing. In fact, I fought for PKA back when I was 16 years old. Fought Full Contact, was on ESPN during the early days when ESPN.
Wait, hold on 1 second, sir. Now you're really fast forwarding over here. This is wonderful. Now again, just to try to keep a timeline. So now you get involved in martial arts at 5 years old. You get an opportunity to start training with who? Who was your instructors also there? Because I know Master Rhee, obviously Grandmaster Rhee was the head instructor, but you came from a legendary group of not just teachers, but competitors.
Yeah,
who were the main instructors?
Yeah, that is true. I had a lot of instructors, throughout my career. When I was younger, my first instructor was a gentleman by the name of Master Quan Rowe, who was the head instructor at Jun Rhee Institute back in the late 60s, early 70s. And then I had Otis Hooper, who came involved, Master Otis Hooper, who now has a school, I think, in the Tidewater area in Virginia. And then, of course, Jeff Smith, world champion Jeff Smith, was a very integral part of my training when I was a child. And as I became an adult and through my competition years, all of the Worley brothers, John Worley, Pat Worley, Gordon Franks, Larry Carnahan, Michael Cole, Danny Bocagno, all of those legendary fighters that we all grew up watching and reading about in the magazine. And when I became when I got into forms very heavily, John Chung, of course, was that person that I followed and idolized because I still believe till today set the standard for form. So those were all, what I would consider, my instructors who developed me and trained me made me into the martial artist that I became.
Wow. That's the who's who. And the handful of people, I should say, the long list of people that you could probably continue talking about in terms of being classmates goes on and on and on. You know, this question was posed. I came up with this question. What would have happened if Master Reed would have never came to the United States? I don't know if we would have been having this conversation.
I tell you, Jerry, I don't think anyone has ever asked me that question before, but I think I have an answer to that. I don't think martial arts would be where we are today, even with the evolution of mixed martial arts and other, forms of sport competition. As you know, Grandmaster Junri invented safety equipment, and the advent of safety equipment came about because one of the top black belts, Pat Worley, was in a tournament in the early 70s and broke his cheekbone in a match. And, Grandmaster Junri thought that if we were ever going to take martial art, into a sport and become a mainstream sport that, mainstream fans would watch, that there would need to be protection, something that is not as brutal as you might see in mixed martial arts today. I mean, if you recall, back in the early 90s when UFC first started, it was a no holds barred. They were in a cage until someone basically relented to their opponent, and it turned off many people. And the new ownership of UFC decided that they needed rules, to protect the fighters. Although there's not the safety equipment that you might see in sport karate, nevertheless you have very skilled and trained referees to protect the fighters. And I think Junri in the early 70s saw that protection was necessary in order to bring martial arts to the mainstream sport. And he invented safety equipment. If you recall, Linda Denley, who was arguably the best woman fighter ever to enter a ring. I mean, she had the original safety punches, which was basically a tube with rubber foam, and she used that even through the days when martial arts equipment revolutionized into what we have today. So I don't I think safety equipment probably would have been invented, but I think it would have been much later. Junri also was the person who started martial ballet, which we know now as a lot of these competitors tricking and performing their katas to music. But Junri was the first one who basically brought Western music to the Far East martial artists, combined the two, and that provides a lot of excitement for the fans, and also provides a lot of excitement for the competitor who's able to choreograph music to their katas. And I think most importantly, I think Junri evolutionized the forms from tradition to American and open martial art. He revolutionized, I think, point fighting in the way, bringing sport karate and bringing skills and bringing and using, boxing and just, other art into our sport karate, and, which evolved into kickboxing and full contact. So, I mean, Junri had his hands on every aspect of martial arts, and but for him, I don't think we would be where we are today.
All right, well, not without any less of importance, quite a few people learned martial arts business via Educational Funding Company with rest in peace Nick Kokinos, but that was the in-house billing company, from what I understand, and management team of the Junri operation. So there again, if this gentleman would not have been in martial arts, I don't think I would have been able to earn those 6 figures a year that I did teaching martial arts when I owned my schools.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good point because, back way back when, as you know, I mean, it was a struggle to make money being a professional martial artist. And Jun Rhee, when he came to the D.C. area, of course, partnered up with the Educational Funding Company and brought in very smart business people that had the vision to allow professional martial artists to actually make a living and make a good living doing it. And I think what you're seeing today with these martial arts schools and owners is that they're very successful business people and have been able to make a living because, again, of the evolution of just like how Jun Rhee evolved, our traditional martial arts, I think he evolved in the business of martial arts as well. And and thank goodness for him and companies like EFC to allow good martial artists to become good business people and make a living at what they love to do.
Well, guys, even though this story is about Master Charlie Lee, how are you addressed in your school? Is it Master, Mister? How would you like to be addressed here?
I've never been one for titles. I've been called Master, Grandmaster, Mister, Charlie, anything. I've been called a lot worse too. So I pretty much answered to anything.
Well, Mr. Lee, how's that? I'll use Mr. Lee because I still respect you. I mean, you and I do have a relationship that's a little unique because most people didn't realize that this forms through. And I'm like, man, if it wasn't for John, I would have won a lot more stuff.
Well, Jerry, you and I go back, a couple of decades, maybe 3 decades, and we're friends first before we're even martial artists. So why don't you just call me Charlie?
Okay, sir. All right, so Charlie, about you in particular was that, and this is what maybe some people didn't realize. There's no question about it. The epitome of what would be a perfect form would have to be a video of John Chung. I mean, arguably the best technician in the history of martial arts that I believe, and quite a few other people.
No doubt.
However, when you did your forms, what was the difference? And you just mentioned it. A lot of people probably start to separate and characterize people as being a forms competitor or a fighter. But we all go through transitions, obviously. One of the things that I want to talk about is the WACO World Championships. Because I believe that when the competition went to that route, Mike Anderson being the mindset behind that, along with Chuck Brookner, but I believe that you was on a pretty famous team that went to represent us, and you was fighting and doing forms. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I was a fighter initially, and then I went and did forms and fighting, and because I was in school, I didn't have the time to train, so I started getting into forms, and forms were at that point getting as popular as fighting. But you're absolutely right. I mean, John Chung, is a beautiful technician, probably the best technician that ever walked on this earth, and I was trained by John when I was in my late teens and early 20s. But I also knew that I wanted to compete, and I could not, go in the shadows of John Chung and expected to reach my aspiration of becoming a world champion, just like John did. And when John was competing in the late 70s and early 80s, there was another competitor, as you know, from the West Coast, on the West Coast demo team. His name was George Chung. And he was essentially I think George had the vision of, putting music together, putting acrobatics together, and doing all of the things that we see today. And John was more of a traditionalist who was focused on the technical aspect of the martial art. So now you had some people that didn't know George did. Because, George was, in my opinion, a decade ahead of everyone in his vision for forms competition. But technically his traditional martial arts was nowhere near what John Chung's was. And then you had other people, who looked at John and thought that, John has not evolved because he was maintaining traditional excellence. So that gave me an opportunity to fill a void, which was essentially to have a combination of what John did and what George did. And that's what I focused my training on, was to maintain the traditional excellence of what John Chung had, but also to incorporate the vision that George Chung did in the early 80s. And that's how I presented myself, was sort of a combination of the two, and it served me well, as you know, during my competition years in the early to mid-80s.
Well, it was interesting because that era, guys, was known as the Chung Dynasty. And one year, one was number one. The next year, the other one was number one. And any way you put it, as spectators, we just were in awe to have an opportunity to see polar opposites still entertain us. And that's something that revolutionized what would be martial arts, because and then now the forms competitors were starting to get as much attention and eventually more attention than even the fighters.
That's correct.
But then the thing happened, like you said, so Charlie Lee comes out and starts doing forms. We're expecting for him to be a version of John Chung, but he says, oh, I'm going to find my niche in between, and the mysterious hands come in. And now all of a sudden, the sidekick is not going as high as you probably throw it, but it's throwing it more like, almost like Miyazaki, right to the head area and popping it, and then you're doing these hand movements that have not been seen in the industry. Today, pretty much rule of thumb when it comes to just combinations. But then you turned around into something that's really cool. You continued in the tradition of the musical forms. And while doing that, you still kept what would be classical Junri moves, front kick, roundhouse, and side kick. So you did gel everything together. Let's talk about the development of that musical form that became, well, actually there was two of them, but your main one that won you more championships, including, I believe, another Waco championship.
Yeah, I guess my signature form was done to the music of the Twilight Zone, which, of course, served me well all the way through the 80s. But, my main competition during my years was, of course, John Frenette out of Canada and Keith Hirabayashi out of L.A. And, I guess John Frenette was my closest competitor because we, did go back and forth in winning our respective grand championships. I'd like to think I won more than him, but I'm sure he'll say that he won more than me, and that's just our competitive nature. But my philosophy was this, and this can be a lesson to a lot of the young competitors. If you try to emulate a competitor, you're never going to be as good as that person. And the judges will start comparing your competitor and will realize that you're not as good as him. For example, Jean Frenette had incredible flexibility. He could kick certainly a lot higher than I can. And he was known for his straight-up kicks and his multiple kicks and all the things that he did. So rather than try and beat Jean Frenette at his game and work on my flexibility and to try to kick as high as him, what I actually did was I started to kick a little bit lower. Because when you kick lower, you can get more power and more pop behind your side kick than your round kick than your front kick. And I started to work on my speed, my hand speed. So what I, in effect, did was to have the judges start comparing my power and my speed to Jean Frenette's power and speed, which I thought I had more of because he was concentrating his technique on his flexibility and being able to do multiple kicks at a very, very high angle. So, those are, a little competitive tactic that I employed, and rather than try to compete against my competitor on what he did best, I did just the opposite and had the judges focus on my power and my stances, my hand speed, and my technique. And I think that is, why I was able to separate myself from the competition because I focus on those things that I was strongest at and not work on things where I knew I could not be as good as my competitors.
I would have to agree because what happened was that all of us, when I looked at Jean, it's not Jean, it's Jean Frenette. We can Jean. And you guys think Puerto Ricans from New York are arrogant. Oh, my God, French Canadian, forget about it. Anyway, matter of opinion. What was really interesting when I looked at Jean Frenette was that he was a little more towards what would be the hybrid between John Chung and George Chung. Right. He did multiple machine gun kicks. He had the flexibility, except he was a short guy, with not too much hair eventually, But besides that, the guy was a crowd pleaser. He knew how to interact. In the middle of the form, he actually was talking or looking at the crowd, asking them to actually give feedback, which was pretty wild considering he was doing machine gun kicks higher than most people can ever fathom. But your choice of that Twilight Zone, where did that come about? Was that your choice, or were you working in somebody else in terms of getting advice?
Well, you're going to embarrass me now, or I'm going to embarrass myself. But, with the advent of musical form, Jeff Smith, who was at that time married to a dancer, a professional dancer, there was a show which was like American Idol back in the late 70s and early 80s called Dance Fever. And John Chung and his sister Helen Chung were on the show in 1980. They did what they called martial ballet. And as you know, I was coming up right behind John, and I was on the show in 1981 with Regina Gonzalez, another great competitor out of Miami, another Junior student. And it was at that time when I discovered that, the fans or the martial artists, who are not used to West meeting East with musical form, it just started to explode. And you're right that forms are becoming as popular, if not more popular than fighting, because it was entertainment. So the following year, the forms that I was doing were forms that were choreographed for me or forms that were part of the junior curriculum. And, I needed to evolve to separate myself, from everyone else who was doing the junior curriculum forms and this form that was choreographed for me for Dance Fever, which was not conducive to the competition that I had to go up against. So, I was watching a movie late night one day, and I heard the Twilight Zone theme, and it just resonated with me, and I said, I need to do a form to this theme. And I debuted it in 1984 at the Lama National. Tom Latuli was the promoter at that time, the late Tom Latuli, who was also a promoter for the competitors, which I really, really liked. And I debuted it then, and I got, rave reviews. And I didn't win Grand Champion. I took runner-up to George Chung, I believe, at that tournament. And then I did it again, and I kept winning. You know what? I take that back. I debuted it at the Lama Nationals, and that was my first Grand Championship. I did win that tournament with that form. And I beat George Chung and John Chung and Cynthia Rothrock, and I think even Karen Shepard was there. A lot of the great martial arts competitors, and I was part of the new wave. And then I just used it. I mean, it worked well for me for the next 6 years. There was another musical form that I created, but that was something that I choreographed on my own, and something that I'm probably most proud of in my martial arts career.
Well, just thinking about it, you just mentioned the legends of the martial arts and the pioneers of what would be competitors. And you was the upstart. You was the young buck coming in. George, you just mentioned Cynthia. You just mentioned Karen Shepard, which was the predecessor to even Cynthia. So she was going through that transition stage. just repeating that right now, how do you feel about that? Just mentioning what the heck you did. Because to me, it sounds incredible.
There were so many competitors. I would say, I just started when, Master Miyazaki was just ending with his incredible, kama. This was when forms and weapons were combined, the competition. And, Miyazaki with his swinging kamas, just incredible. And I was upstarting with, competitors like, my good friend and the late Stuart Kwan, if you recall him, was another incredible competitor with enormous power, from Fresno. Sonny Ono, was just one of the greatest, competitors, traditional martial artists that was able to actually compete against, the likes of John and George and, myself and John Burnett doing a traditional form. And he beat us on many occasions. I could just go on and on of, many of these great competitors. Master Dennis Brown, when he did the rope dart, and, he was the person who really put soft style forms, on the map in men's competition because, soft style was primarily, with Cynthia Rothrock and Karen Shepard, and Dennis came on. Dennis was on the scene, promoting soft style for the men. And what you may
and
not
then you have, how about a Dale Cook? A Dale Cook with a freaking samurai sword.
Oh yeah. He was unbelievable. With the samurai nails to, chop toilet paper in midair to show everyone how sharp his blade was. He was an incredible athlete as well. There's so many competitors. They were all just awesome. And
I believe that was one of the most special eras, not just in forms, but in fighting too. I honestly, and again, I'm obviously biased. I'm getting ready to be 50 years young in a few weeks. And when I think about that era, I feel so blessed to have had a chance to spectate, read about, and then at some point towards the end of it, participate in quite a bit of it. And I don't really know if we'll ever get a chance to see that level of consistency of quality in either fighting or forms again, because it was a very unique time. What would you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think what's missing nowadays, this has always been my philosophy as a promoter, that forms provides great entertainment, but you cannot. Did I lose you, Jerry?
Yes, for a slight second.
Okay. So what I was saying was that as a promoter, forms was very important because it provided entertainment value, but I never thought that martial arts could get to the next level without creating superstars and fighting. We needed fighting superstars. And when we had Karate Illustrated magazine, and that magazine created superstars in the martial arts like Nasty Anderson and Keith Vitale and Ray McCallum, Billy Blank, all those guys that we grew up watching. They're the ones who made the sport, and us forms guys, I think, brought a different element because martial arts was more than fighting, and I think we really missed out on an opportunity, with fighters like Raymond Daniels, who in my opinion is the Muhammad Ali of our sport karate era in the 2000s. That kid is just incredible, and he really made his name on his own, doing other things and being so great without the help of promotion of magazines and and with the advent of social media. There's no reason why Raymond Daniels shouldn't be a millionaire right now, and just be a household name. So I think that's where we failed as promoters in creating the superstars of this next generation. And I think that's why we were so popular in the 80s, because we had Karate Illustrated magazine promoting us and being able to be on magazine covers and the like. So, Jerry, everyone just contributed to what we had in the 80s. You were a great competitor, from New York. You brought that New York brash into the competition. You made competition fun. And you helped evolve martial arts, as much as I did, and John Chung and everyone else, because, it takes all of us to really, have an era of martial arts, and as many people, know Billy Blanks and Nancy Anderson are going to know Jerry Patsy Fontenez as well, because, we were able to all compete in an era and travel the country, scraping by because, we weren't making a whole lot of money. And I think most of us went to these tournaments, not because we had such competitive drives, which we all did, because it was so damn fun, and the camaraderie that among all of the competitors.
Well, I appreciate that compliment, and I'm also the number one fan of sport karate ever. The reason I'm doing this thing, this is called My 300. If I went to war and I could only pick 300 people to go compete with, Mr. Lee, you are on my 300. This is what it is about. And it's like you said, it's an industry. It's the village itself working together to try to help that child or those children. And one of the challenges that, you always got me because you and I are friends. But a lot of people, obviously, and you heard it 1,000 times, what the hell's wrong with him? When I was in character to get the crowd response, people just did not get it. And I remember fighting in the U.S. Open, and I officially lost to a guy named Duncan Moody. But it was the loudest crowd I have heard in sparring in decades. And I was more satisfied with that. But just to be fair, I was also earning quite a bit of income as a martial arts professional school owner with multiple schools. And that's where Grandmaster Ree and I, who have shared the podium together, is where he respects me a little more. You're a great competitor because I won the Junior Internationals. I actually won that tournament, grand champion, 2 out of 4 years, but I won the division every year. And the only reason I went is because how could I not be part of what would be history? No, it wasn't the Junior Nationals, but it was the Internationals. No, it wasn't just Grandmaster Ree himself, but it was Chun. And I had to be part of that. The first time I visited Washington, D.C. in 1976, maybe this is not something that, I would be too proud of now, but I didn't know. I went to see Sun Moon with Grandmaster Sansu Tiger Kim, and that's when I met Master Ree, who had done a few years before that when Taekwondo Strikes, So I was heavily involved in the martial arts as a spectator or as a fan. I visualized myself on Karate Illustrated magazine, and then they took that away from us, and then the world changed. I have a few people that I've already interviewed that you may know, like you mentioned, the Michael Coles, and I did Ray McCallum and John Longstreet and Rudy Smeltley and Joe Corley and Keith Vitale and Marty Knight. And in addition to that, I have lined up a lady you may know, like you mentioned, 2 days from now, it'll be Cynthia Roswell. And then next week, I have a guy that most of you would not know who he is. However, we all knew who he was because if it wasn't for him, maybe we would not have even known who these people are. And that's Ronaldo Barden himself, former editor of Karate Illustrated. So what I'm trying to do is give us a timeline to understand what happened. Because when we were already in Madison Square Garden, when we were already on ESPN TV, when we were already winning 2,500 or going to Bermuda and winning 5,000 in terms of the fighters, most people have no idea that happened. So for lack of a better description, we are still in the dark ages of martial arts. So I'm trying to enlighten people by just connecting some dots and some timeline. And lucky enough, at this present time, we still have people who are alive and remember. And that's what I'm trying to either motivate them or at the very least tap their brains so they get some respect for the things that they actually did. One of the things that you did, Mr. Lee, that I freaking loved was you stepped up the game and you say, hey, Diamond National sounds pretty good, but how about a Rolex? Let's talk about that a little. When you transcended from a competitor to the promoter, and a Rolex watch was an actual prize money. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes with my philosophy, and, I for received all my accolades as a forms competitor, and you might wonder why am I giving a Rolex to the fighters and not to the forms people? And the answer is simple. You can't have a circuit of forms competitors. It would not survive. Martial art can only advance because it is self-defense and it is a fighting art. You know, we do forms to help us with our fighting and with our technique. And I wanted to elevate the fighting and get these fighters to do more than just train at the karate school, but to train for something that has value. And, you know, what more, can you express your training and the hard work that you've done than a Rolex watch, which is going to last you a lifetime. So, you know, I created or modified certain rules, to weed out the fighters who like to just tag rather than to use technique and have power. I weeded those fighters out, and came up with the Rolex Challenge. It was a big hit for, I think, 7 years that I did it. Raymond Daniels won most of the Rolexes, but I know Brian Ruth had won one, and Mike Pompiero and Jason Borelli won one. But I think Raymond won 5 of them, which just goes to show how dominant Raymond was during his era. And, I've read, I think, somewhere on social media, that Dennis Brown wants to bring that back and other promoters. And I hope they do. I really, really hope they do, because I think the fighters and the competitors, really enjoyed that, and I like being part of history, and I think it's a good thing to provide something beyond a plastic trophy to show someone's hard work and dedication to winning a championship like the Rolex Challenge.
Now, let's just talk about briefly. I'm going to be, guys, please understand. Presently, this gentleman, we cannot afford to have him for an hour because I'm sure his fees are pretty high. What are you presently doing? Do you still own a martial arts school, or give it an overview about the present?
All right. Well, Jerry, you know that I'm a full-time lawyer, and I, retired from competition in 1989 at the Diamond Nationals, and coincidentally, that was the day I found out I passed the bar exam, and I've been a full-time practicing lawyer for the last 26 years. I did own a martial arts school, Charlie Lee Karate, original, right, from 1991, and then I was just too busy with my law practice to maintain the school and to run a martial arts tournament on the scale that I did, when I promoted the World Series of Martial Arts. So I gave that up in 2007. I gave up my karate school in 2010, and I've taken a hiatus from martial arts to focus on my law practice, and I've also just started up a new legal software company in the last year. But I do intend on coming back to martial arts in some capacity after I have done practicing law and have hopefully succeeded in my new legal software venture. I did go back to the Diamond Nationals last year because it was a 25-year anniversary when I competed. Just reflect on martial arts, something that I did to myself. But as of right now, I'm just practicing law full time, running my legal software company, and hoping one day that I'll be able to have the means to give back to the martial arts in a very significant way that martial arts has given to me over the last truly 5 decades of my life.
Well, all I have to say is that, guys, I'm sure you learned quite a bit of information. I got some insights and information here, which is something that this is all about. I believe that with information, education gives people options. And the fact of the matter is that living in the dark ages, as at least I call it, because I know I'm kind of crazy, but I believe by giving people, see, this is what I really believe. I believe that a lot of the things that could have happened almost are like not an embarrassment, but like a thorn in the side when we were already in the garden. And a lot of the people who know better are just, for lack of a better description, they're just tired. They're older. They're a lot older than me. And I think that the bridge between, I should say, not the bridge, the pass, or should say relay. The relay race went from, it should have been, from those promoters to the ones that were a little younger to the ones like me. I'm going to be 50, so I think it's our turn to pick up the ball and try to take things to the next level, because the guys who are in the 70s and late 60s, man, they've been doing it a long time. They wouldn't mind passing the baton is what I meant. So I'm trying to figure out an angle of what I can do in order to help. In recent months, I've been spending quite a bit of time with Master Joe Corley, and my angle with him and guys like Bill Clark and even Jeff Smith is the technology part, because I've been doing websites and mobile sites and even apps, since 2001, apps about 4 years already. And this is something most people didn't realize about me when I invented the uniforms and things like that. So I'm always finding what can I add to the industry that's a little similar but different. And there's no media that really breaks the history and the timeline of this incredible industry / martial arts family. And it hurts my heart when I get interviewed 2 times this year in the Battle of Atlanta, and they walk past 15 people, including Jerry Rome, and don't even interview him. They don't even know who he is. And that's not right. I think these people are the giants that we stand on the shoulders on, and they shouldn't be recognized for things that they've done, because they are the forefathers. I had Jeff Gripper, and I don't think he'll get upset at me, actually cry in the interview, because he was so gracious, that simple fact, not that I was interviewing him, but that he was still alive and how martial arts saved his life. I had Malaya de Cascos Burnell today on an interview. I am not pulling bottom line is that I'm martial arts' biggest fan, and I want to make sure that as many people possible know who these people really are. Charlie Lee was not just a former competitor. He's a real martial artist, to the point where he sacrificed time, money, and effort in an endeavor called an art, which if he would have focused on his business practice, then you probably would have been more successful. And you already said it again. Your intention is, at another stage in your life, after taking care of business, is to return, and I think you said on another level. So all I'm trying to do is make sure that when you do return, other things in the checklist that should be done have been taken care of, and at the very least, they'll know how we got here, who got us there, and I think we can learn a lot from the past. We're already in the garden, so maybe we can learn some stuff. I interviewed Harry Krebs, who did the Budweiser deal. So I'm doing my effort. Any shout-outs before you leave? Because we're about the 45-minute mark, and I know that you're extremely expensive, and I can't pay you. So any shout-outs that you want to give credit? I know the list will be long, but I just want to make sure that you're satisfied with what we're doing here also, sir.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great service, Jerry. And I think you used the word bridging the gap between, the guys who paved the way for the next generation and the now generation. And, people like Joe Corley, with the Battle of Atlanta, the 2 Mikes, Mike McCoy, Mike Sawyer with the U.S. Open, Larry Carnahan and John Worley with the Diamond Nationals. Those were the 3 big tournaments that I think a lot of people made their name from. When you mention names like Jerry Rome, I still remember that knockout he had of Brad Hefton. I could see that vividly like it was yesterday. I remember watching Jeff Gripper fight and just knocking out his opponents left and right. These were all great martial artists, and anything you can do to keep those names and those martial artists alive, I think, is a tremendous benefit for the now generation. And so, you should be commended for all of your efforts as well. And I really don't have anything more to add than what we talked about today. I think we talked about a lot, and just want to thank you for inviting me on your show. And you know where to find me now, and I hope to see you very, very soon in the near future.
Well, I appreciate it. Just one last thing. In the future, if there's any way possible, because what I want to put together is a few questions for what would be advice for promoters I think a platform for people to learn how to promote a tournament can help. There's standard order procedures in every industry. And in my crazy mind, I think the only reason why this industry, like others, are not successful is because of management lack their ability to disseminate information so people can utilize it. Maybe it's me, but that's what I think. I don't know. I can't buy the manual on how to promote a karate tournament, and I want to make sure that we're able to have that for the industry, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. I think, we, and I think this is, to me, it's a very simple problem. And the reason that sport karate has not elevated to a level that we thought it should by this point is because these tournaments and the promoters are all working for themselves. I mean, this is their own individual tournament, and some have been very, very successful, and others have not. And I think the only way to really elevate our sport as far as the tournaments and promoters are concerned is for all of them to join forces and be one company that promotes these tournaments, because the strength of 10 people is far greater than the strength of one person times 10. And I've been a big proponent of that even when I was a promoter with NASCA in the early 2000s. And the structure needs to be such, in my opinion, there will be some who disagree, but the structure needs to be such that you have one corporation and all of the tournaments are part of that corporation. So everyone has an interest in each other's tournament and has an interest in seeing everyone else succeed. And I think if you have that, I think it'll just make for a stronger organization, and I think the results will far exceed the expectations and the results that we've had now.
Well, appreciate that, sir. One last thing. In the famous words of some crazy Puerto Ricans from the Bronx, Charlie, when I say A-B, you say see ya. A-B?
See ya.
And you used to do that. Charlie, you're one of the only people who really got me. When I was competing on stage, you knew I give you some information. You taught it back to me, and, man, I appreciate that. I mean, I really, really appreciate that, because what made the difference between you and the most, even on the microphone, was your awareness of crowd response. And you knew the faster we was going to get on that stage, I'm going to wake up the dead.
All right, Jerry.